Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 24th of April 2019, a little bit after 1 o'clock. Apologies for the technical problems there. Presenters today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. The weather has changed, Mike.
It has.
That'll be global warming, that'll be climate change.
Absolutely. And of course, well, we were finding out all about this yesterday because as Jeremy Corbyn tweeted out here, it was a pleasure welcoming UK youth climate strikers and Greta Thunberg to Parliament. Young people will be the most affected by climate change. Seeing them take charge of their future is inspiring. Labour's committed to working with young people campaigning to save our planet. So it's all about the young people. What was she saying to Parliament? She said nothing is being done. She said that she and her fellow children had been sold, apparently. We probably don't even have a future anymore. The future has been sold, that a small number of people can make unimaginable amounts of money. She said the basic problem is that it's the same everywhere, and is that nothing is being done. You don't listen to the science because you're only interested in the answers that will allow you to carry on as if nothing has happened. So not interested in the science. That's quite an interesting little statement. So what was Piers Corbyn saying? This, of course, is Jeremy Corbyn's brother. And he tweeted this out yesterday evening. Listening to an ignorant, brainwashed child is deranged. I'm an actual scientist of physics, meteorology, astrophysics and climate, and say that Greta Thunberg is wrong and suffers mental abuse by manipulative adults. I have to say, I tend to agree with the sentiment of that, in the sense that, in my opinion, Brian, she is absolutely being manipulated here. It could be, the word abuse, I think, is not necessarily inappropriate.
No, I don't think so at all, because basically it isn't as if you've got one adult using the opinion of the child. This is a whole political machinery which has been ramped up to use that child for political ends. So yeah, I'd say it's abuse.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to know a little bit more about Greta Thunberg, then get over to this website here, The Wrong Kind of Green.
This is screen.
Oh, sorry. I thought I had it on there. I do apologies. Yeah, thank you. So this is an interesting series of articles, 6 parts here by Cory Morningstar. Now, of course, anybody that doesn't know who Cory Morningstar is, she was really the first to discover what the white helmets were about in Syria, excellent researcher, excellent journalist. So she's got 6 parts to this article here, which is called "The Manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for Consent: The Political Economy of the New Non-Profit Industrial Complex," is Act 1, as she describes it, of this. And she says that she discloses that Greta Thunberg, the current child prodigy in the face of the youth movement to combat climate change, served as a special youth advisor and trustee to the burgeoning mainstream tech startup We Don't Have Time. And then she looks at the ambitions behind this organization, We Don't Have Time. And then in the second part, she's looking at how today's youth, as she describes it, are sacrificial lambs for the ruling elite. Also in this act, she introduces the board members and advisors to We Don't Have Time. That includes people linked with Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, 350.org, Avaz, Global Utmaning, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum. So the usual suspects in there. As I say, 6 parts in this altogether. She looks at the Green New Deal, the data for progress, targeting of female youth as a key demographic, and so on. And this is an excellent piece of work, and I do suggest that everybody reads that if they want to get a bit more of the background of this young lady.
Yeah, manipulation of young people. This is where, of course, Common Purpose came in all those years ago, back in 1985, straight into the schools, straight to get the political, the pro-EU propaganda going with 11 to 14-year-olds. And this theme followed through government. Somebody said to me, now I think this was Nick Clegg who has been talking about this, but more or less we're going to get the old people all going. We haven't got to worry about the old people because it'll be the youngsters that help ease us into the European Union. So children becoming the weapon of the political elite at the moment.
Yes.
I'll see whether I can get that quote, if indeed it was from Nick Clegg, but certainly from a politician.
Well, look, a number of the mainstream press, including the Daily Mail and The Sun, probably for the first time really having a go at Piers Corbyn, highlighting the fact that he is Jeremy Corbyn's brother. And, well, there was one particular phrase that I found interesting, and that is the term agreed science. And of course, if people don't quite get the irony of those two words when they're put together in that way, then perhaps this gives us a clue. Now, this is Dan Hodges, who is a Sunday Mail reporter, and he was tweeting this out this morning. I genuinely think that within my lifetime, we will see people going to jail for the crime of climate change denial. And to be honest, I find that even scarier than global warming. Well, this, I think, is the major concern here, because what we have absolutely within, again, the narrative of the mainstream press as a whole, there's nobody in the mainstream press offering any sort of alternative to the mainstream consensus, and it is summed up by those two words, agreed science. It's like a dogma. It's as if anybody saying anything outside of that agreed science is a heretic. This is very Middle Ages-like, Brian. And you're talking about the youth. So let's just, if anybody hasn't looked up the Children's Crusade from the Middle Ages, then perhaps you might want to do that, because of course what we're seeing, there's nothing new under heaven and earth, as they say, and this has been done before, if you want to have a look at the Children's Crusade. But anyway, getting back to the original tweet from Jeremy Corbyn here, there was a reply to this tweet from Jeremy Corbyn that I just wanted to highlight, and that was this one. When climate change is ever mentioned, no one notices the elephant in the room, overpopulation. So less people equals less emissions. Simples, don't have too many babies. Well, of course, it doesn't just end at not having too many babies. If what we are actually talking about here is population reduction. Well, just interestingly enough, Highways England has produced a report showing that motorway accidents are producing 88% more accidents. Motorways that have been have had the light switched off at night are producing 88% more accidents in 2017 as opposed to 2010. Of course, well, let's just put the figures on screen here. Now, of course, the actual numbers of casualties are relatively low for unlit motorways. But the point is that there are still relatively few unlit motorways compared to lit motorways. So, but the point, you have to look at the trends, and the trend is clearly up for unlit motorways, and it's clearly down for lit motorways. So over the same period of time, casualties in lit motorways has reduced. There's nothing particularly new in this, except that it's up-to-date statistics, because back in 2010, the AA was reporting this report from it was published in the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, the effects of reduced street lighting on road casualties and crime in England and Wales, controlled interrupted time series analysis, and they were showing a very similar type of thing, that when, in this case in urban areas, the street lights were being switched off, the number of people being affected by that through road accidents was increasing. So perhaps this needs to be taken into account, the results of the type of policy that we seem to be increasingly pursuing and very keen to pursue through Extinction Rebellion and so on. That has consequences. And of course, if we reduce the birth rate, then we have to do something about elderly people, Brian, and then the question is, what do we do with them?
Well, I'm going to say the politicians already know what to do with elderly people, which is why we're seeing a massive increase in the death rate of elderly people within the NHS and the care system. There's a lot of information still to come out about this, but we know that data around the Mid-Staffs Hospital, for example, was the tip of the iceberg, with a number of elderly people dying unnecessarily within the NHS, and that hasn't declined with so-called changes in the Liverpool Care Pathway, for example, we know that the death rate has actually dramatically increased and is still increasing. So people who are concerned about the NHS and the care system say that we're already seeing a policy to get rid of elderly people. I'll just add as a positive note that for your journalist, Dan Hodges, that when people say to us, what can we do, if Dan Hodges is worried about the fact that people are going to go to prison for denying climate change, we need to be on his Twitter page and on his email address supporting him and giving him more evidence of what's coming. So don't just sit there and look at this man who's now starting to wake up. It would be great if a lot of people would give him support and encouragement for finally starting to speak out.
Well, just by coincidence, Brian, as all this has been ramping up in the press as a result of Extinction Rebellion and so on, well, Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, the outgoing Governor of the Bank of England, published this article in The Guardian: "The financial sector must be at the heart of tackling climate change." He said the catastrophic effects of climate change are already visible around the world, from blistering heat waves in North America to typhoons in Southeast Asia and droughts in Africa and Australia. No country or community is immune. These events damage infrastructure and private property, negatively affect health, decrease productivity and destroy wealth, and they're extremely costly. Insured losses have risen fivefold in the past 3 decades. The enormous human and financial cost of climate change are having a devastating effect on our collective well-being. And that is why, he says, 34 central banks and supervisors representing 5 continents, half of global greenhouse gas emissions, and the supervision of 2/3 of the global system, systemically important banks and insurers, joined forces in 2017 to create the Coalition of the Willing, the Network for Greening the Financial System. And they have published their first report. There it is, A Call for Action: Climate Change as a Source of Financial Risk. And what are they talking about? Well, there's 4 main outcomes from this. They want to integrate the monitoring of climate-related financial risks into day-to-day supervisory work. This is good stuff. And they want to lead by example. So the banks are going to lead by example. They're going to collaborate to bridge the data gaps to enhance the assessment of climate-related risks. And they're going to build in-house capacity and share knowledge with other stakeholders on management of climate-related financial risks. So what's this really all about? Well, it's really all about the banks wanting to take advantage of certainly the hysteria, if we can call it that, surrounding climate change, and make sure that they're in a position to, if sentiment is a key driver of financial well-being, then they want to make sure that if people are holding a certain sentiment with respect to events, that they're in a position to benefit from that. So what did he have to say? As long as temperatures and sea levels continue to rise, and with them climate-related financial risks, central banks, supervisors and financial institutions will continue to raise the bar to address these climate-related risks and to green the financial system. So it's all about opportunity, really. And there you go.
These people are dangerously mad, it seems to me, Mike, because what are these risks? Does he actually give any examples of what these massive risks are in the paper? Perhaps he does, perhaps he doesn't. But we can't solve the simple things, the potholes in the road, but we are going to tackle global climate change, even though the evidence is not there in the first place. It's remarkable.
Well, don't worry, he's on his way out. Well, here's Philip Hammond telling us that he's about to look for a new governor. In today's rapidly evolving economy, the role of governor is more important than ever. So they've started looking for a new one.
So Carney's going to be composted.
Yes. He's done enough. He's created enough carnage, and he's on his way now. So that's good stuff. Now, even better news, because the news can only get better, can't it? Anne Widdecombe, the well-known former Tory MP and commentator, has joined Nigel Farage and is going to be standing as a candidate in the upcoming European elections, if they have any upcoming European elections. Now, of course, Theresa May has more or less announced now that she's going to attempt to get her deal through Parliament for a fourth time. And if she fails to do that, then there are going to be European elections. I believe over the weekend, Nigel Farage was saying he was kind of hoping that that was going to be the outcome. But anyway, if she fails to get her deal through, it'll be October the 22nd before we leave, in inverted commas, and that means that there's going to be European elections, and she's going to be standing. So that's good news, Brian.
Good.
Yes. But related to Brexit, of course, is the situation over the Tory leadership and whether Theresa May is going to have a job for terribly much longer. Now, one of the candidates to potentially replace her, of course, was Johnny Mercer. And perhaps that's a little bit gives us a clue as to why this particular story is in the BBC today and also in the Plymouth News. This is Plymouth Herald. Source of Plymouth MP Johnny Mercer's private £85,000 salary exposed. Now, Johnny Mercer, of course, former military himself. He had taken a second job while he's MP. He did declare this, which is how people found out about it. And his second job was working for a company helping veterans back into work, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. So he was doing 200 hours a week, 200 hours a month, sorry, 200 hours a week. Try this again. 200 hours a month. It's our first day back after a few days off, and it's a bit of a problem. 200 hours a month, 20 hours a month. Let's try that again. Okay, 20 hours a month. So that's a reasonable hourly rate. I think that's £350 an hour or so he's getting for this. But unfortunately, the company that he's working for is linked to a firm which is being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office for what? Apparently a lot of people lost some money on missold investments. And this is now under investigation by the Serious Fraud Office. Now, the point is here that the links between the organisation that Johnny Mercer is working for and the company that's which is called London Capital and Finance, which is under investigation by the Serious Fraud Office, the links are slightly tenuous. So I think this article is all about attempting to discredit Johnny Mercer in advance of any attempt to stand as the leader of the Tory party. But Brian, the issue for me here really is that here is a man who already has a pretty well-paid job. He's earning a salary much larger than most other people in the city of Plymouth. And he feels the need to take on a second job, which earns him a second salary of £85,000 a year. This was the kind of shenanigans that was going on in Northern Ireland all the time I was growing up, with MPs also being members of the European Parliament, also being members of the Regional Assembly, and ending up with three salaries and multiple salaries. How many jobs does he need? And if he was really supportive of veterans, my question is, would he not have done that job, which, as I say, 20 hours a month, it was a non-executive director's post. Could he not have done that on a voluntary basis? Why did he need to be taking such a huge salary for that?
Greed.
Okay.
In my opinion. Maybe it's not, but that's my opinion. Yes, we're seeing this across the board, Mike. The other thing is, I think it's fascinating. All of a sudden, we've got the BBC and we've got media attacking Johnny Mercer. Now, it's very strange. Johnny Mercer's not doing very well with his reputation with the veterans at the moment, because he's been attacking, really, veterans who are speaking up for the debacle of Brexit. But on the other hand, over a number of weeks, Johnny Mercer's name has been put forward as possible parliamentary, a leader, Prime Minister candidate. And it's almost as though there's a calculated character assassination of Johnny Mercer here to make sure we don't have a former military person taking on the role of Prime Minister, because should he come to see the wisdom of the veterans, this would cause huge problems. So on one hand, I'm not a fan of Johnny Mercer. He's big on selling soap and he likes his second salary. But I think there's a bit of an attack on him here. Be interested to see how it pans out. Well, let's have a look at Theresa May, because, the good news is that Theresa May is going to save Christianity across the world. And over Easter weekend, She was bigging up on her Christian dedication. This is the Daily Mail. Theresa May vows to crack down on Christian prosecution around the world as she delivers a passionate Easter message saying Britain will stand up for religious freedom. So she can't quite crack Brexit, but not to worry, because on top of climate change, Theresa May is now going to save Christians around the world. And we have a stunning picture of her, so well done from the Mail. This is all the same article. She said, for millions of Christians in this country and around the world, Easter is a particularly special time when we remember the powerful message at the heart of our Christian faith, a message of hope in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But for many Christians around the world, such simple acts of faith can bring huge danger. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Around the world, there are many Christians saying that actually it produces a problem here. We should remember, of course, she is leader of the UK government of occupation. She says that churches have been attacked, Christians murdered, families forced to flee their homes. That is why the government has launched a global review into the persecution of Christians. This is just astonishing stuff, Mike. We are going to be monitoring the persecution of Christians around the globe with what? The view to doing nothing, presumably.
Encouraging it, perhaps?
Or encouraging it, yes, absolutely. So I'll just label this cynical use of Christianity for political gain. Fascinating picture of her there. With more baubles around her neck and quite some eyes. But let's go back to 2017, and this is Heart, a Christian publication. This was only sent through to us in the last couple of days. They were reporting in June, July 2017, an interview with the Prime Minister. Faith has been my strength. And she says that her Christian faith helped her when she found out she couldn't have children, when her parents died, and will no doubt have helped her cope with the ups and downs of political life. When asked if going through these two personal traumatic periods could have made her lose her faith, Mrs. May said no, because it's difficult to explain in simple words, but actually the faith was there and did provide support for me through those difficult times. Now, if you go on in the article, it gets more interested because she's picked up, however, the Prime Minister recently failed to support Christians who are being targeted for their views on sexuality. Like Lib Dem leader and fellow Christian Tim Farron, she denied that homosexual sex is a sin and aggressively, and when asked if she thought there was an aggressively judgmental mood being imposed on Christians, she dodged the question by saying that party leaders should expect to be asked about all kinds of things. Now, you can have whatever opinion you like about the issue of homosexuality, but what is being pointed out here is that Theresa May is being a hypocrite. She's claiming one thing, but if you look at what she does in her politics, she's doing something completely different. And I find it very interesting that at a time when she's clearly failing, she's come on to the subject, Christianity, I think to try and boost her popularity. But we go on a bit because that popularity for Theresa is now reached a record low. It says that she's being urged to quit on her own terms before MPs find a way to oust her. And it's quite clear that behind the scenes there's a lot of effort going into how Mrs. May can be removed. In that particular article, here is the statistics of popularity of key people in the cabinet. So it ranges from a plus, I think that's 40.4 to minus 73.5, which is Theresa herself. So Theresa's in a little bit of trouble, Mike, and I think she's cynically used Christianity as a means to try and boost her position.
Yes.
But good news, Christians around the world, the British government is going to save them.
Okay, well, something the British government is also attempting to save, of course, is newspapers, because without them, their narrative can't get out. But Warren Buffett has made a comment about newspapers in the last day or so. He said that newspapers are toast. So he, of course, owns quite a number of newspapers, including the Buffalo News, the Omaha World Herald, and a whole bunch of other local newspapers. But he's saying that that newspaper industry has gone from monopoly to franchise, and really it's dead as a business, with the exception of a couple of large outlets. But he's saying that because the world has changed so much, and particularly the advertising industry has changed so much, basically people are not going to newspapers anymore for buying cars or getting jobs. All this stuff's moved onto the internet, into other specialist websites, and therefore the print media isn't getting the same income. So he's pretty much echoing the concerns that the British government had before they created the Cairn Cross Review in the middle of last year. He explained that advertising revenue for US newspapers has gone from 49 billion to 18 billion since 2016, and it upsets the people in the newsroom to talk that way, he said, but the ads were the most important editorial content from the standpoint of the reader. But he said this to say that not all newspapers are doomed. He believes the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal are going to survive. Well, perhaps, certainly in this country, as we have reported recently, the British government doesn't believe that the British equivalents of these newspapers, even at that scale, can survive without the help of the government. And so, we reported on the Cairn Cross Review. Have a look at past UK column news programmes for more on that. But we expect to see more legislation to support the mainstream press in the not too distant future.
Yeah. Well, surveillance comes in nicely here, and again another Mail article, but it's talking about secret filming in shops, and this is to do with Tesco and Sainsbury's and other places. They were using SBXL to get data, video data on shoppers that was apparently then being used as a way of increasing sales. But the article pointing out that, of course, this is a massive invasion of people's privacy because you don't know you're being filmed. On the other hand, we can say you're being filmed as you drive along the motorway by cameras at various points. You're being filmed by so-called safety camera systems in shopping malls and shopping centres, and nobody's getting too fussed about that. But I was interested that the Information Commissioner did get very excited about this one. She says, "I don't expect to have to check whether I'm being watched by secret cameras when I'm deciding what cheese to buy or picking between easy or healthy lunch options. Filming like this raises a number of privacy concerns. We'll be looking into this and acting if we suspect the law has been broken. Whether people are buying apples or liking a social media post, they have a right to expect the law is being followed. The Information Commissioner is vowing to bring the full force of the law against the invasive practice of shops secretly filming customers." So my question here, Mike, is this lady genuine? Is she really upset about what's happened here? Or is this a sort of rubber stamping exercise to say, well, we're very concerned about it, but we'll find in a couple of weeks that they'll have looked into it, but it's okay, rubber stamp, and the filming will continue?
Well, the answer to that will come based on what action gets taken.
Yeah, so we'll see. Well, let's move on to the sad subject of Robert Greene. Over the last couple of weeks, we've reported, of course, the death of Robert Greene, and I'm able to say that the funeral service for Robert will take place this coming Monday, that's 29th of April, All Saints Church, Daresbury Village, Cheshire, and there'll be refreshments at the Ring of Bells pub at 3 p.m. Now, I understand the church is a goodly size, so there will be room for people who would like to go and pass their respects to Robert, for Robert. If numbers are very large, we will have to see, but I've been asked to put those details out by Robert's family, so of course we're very happy to do that.
Okay, now just quickly, if you like what the UK column does and would like to support us, please get along to the community website and consider joining us. And a brief reminder of Robert Stewart's fundraiser on Indiegogo for a documentary about saving Syria's children. The question is, did the BBC lie? Well, we believe the BBC did lie, but he wants to produce a a formal documentary on this, and we would encourage everybody that can to make a contribution to that fundraiser if they possibly can. Thank you very much. Now, speaking of GCHQ, Brian, the Cyber UK 2019 security event is taking place in Glasgow today and tomorrow. And this is very important because the UK, the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand will all have representatives at it. So this is the first time the Five Eyes countries have got together in the UK. So Kieran Martin, who's the Chief Executive of the National Cybersecurity Centre, said cybersecurity is an international team sport. And we're delighted to host allies from around the world in this public way to discuss how we best defend from common adversaries. Cyber attacks do not respect international boundaries, and many of the threats and vulnerabilities we face are shared around the globe. Each nation has sovereignty to defend itself as it sees best fit, but it's vital that we work closely with our allies to make the world as safe as possible. So there you go. So there are a number of people, as I say, from the Five Eyes countries, from government, from industry, and from law enforcement to take part in this event. Well, they're really lucky because they're going to have speeches from GCHQ Director Jeremy Fleming and also from the Cabinet Office Minister David Lidington. So that's really impressive. Jeremy Hunt, pretty excited about it as well. The UK is one of the leading cyber powers in the world. But this is a global threat that needs a global response, and they're going to sort everything out in the next 2 days.
This is one of the most good news we've ever done.
I think it is, yeah.
Because we're pleased to announce to the world that Theresa May and Britain's Conservative Party have declared that they are going to save Christians worldwide. We're going to save the planet from global warming. We're going to use the financial services industry to get involved in that. That's going to be good. What else are we going to do?
Well, we're going to save the world from cyber.
Absolutely. We're going to save the world from cyber threat, and we're going to have fun doing it because it's now been designated a sport.
Yes.
So that'll be good for betting. Well, let's have a look at other things that GCHQ is up to. More good news because spies are set to help banks fight fraud, as GCHQ will share intelligence to help firms guard against cyber attacks. Now, we recently reported that we had a police commissioner, where was that, in Thames Valley, who was pointing out that police forces around the world are absolutely failing to investigate massive banking fraud. But now we've got GCHQ that's going to be working alongside the banks to help protect against that fraud. I almost think that this report itself is fraudulent, that what they say they're doing, they are not going to do. So I don't know. I think there's some questions to be asked of GCHQ here. But let's bring in your man, or maybe let's just give a little bit of the text. GCHQ is to start sharing intelligence with British banks in an attempt to tackle fraud and cyber attacks. The move is part of plans for the spy agency to work more closely with businesses. Its director, Jeremy Fleming, will say today. It's understood this could range from GCHQ helping prevent credit card and bank account fraud to alerting banks if they become targets of computer hackers. This information can be given to banks in real time thanks to the agency's 24-hour monitoring of online activity. This is all good news, Mike, isn't it?
Yes, I'm sure the Information Commissioner will be delighted to know that GCHQ is monitoring the internet 24 hours a day and is able to identify this type of attack and deal with it so promptly.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's bring in the man concerned. Here he is, Jeremy Fleming. We've called him the Commercial Director of GCHQ. That, of course, is a little bit of black humour. He said this technological revolution is providing extraordinary opportunity, innovation and progress, but it's also exposing us to increasing complexity, uncertainty and risk. GCHQ will do more to take the burden of cybersecurity away from the individual. We will share intelligence with banks to enable them to alert customers to threats in close to real time. So we as individuals are too silly, really, Mike, to understand any of this stuff. So the state, GCHQ, is going to take the burden away from us because we're mere children. We don't really understand. and they're going to work with the banks to protect the customers, albeit that when major allegations of fraud, billions of pounds worth, are coming to the surface, police forces themselves are not investigating banks. It's a little bit confusing. Well, let's just have a look at one of the excellent images in this article. They had this comment last year. It was revealed it was preventing GCHQ. Last year, it was revealed that GCHQ was preventing around 10 serious cyber attacks every week, largely from hostile states. So this is very interesting because GCHQ once again is making a claim with absolutely no evidence to support the claim at all. I'm pretty sure that typo is actually in the article itself. So anybody who's keen on spotting typos can have a look. But there we are. So we make a claim at the good work that we're doing. I think we should be asking a question: a GCH working with the banks or a GCHQ working for the banks themselves? It's pretty difficult to understand. Maybe we can get a better picture of our security by having a little look at this. Now, something that many people have been reporting to the UK column over a number of months is the power of the Cabinet Office, and the fact it's quite clear that backbench MPs simply have no idea what is really happening in politics or defence or intelligence. So we put together a little bit of information on how the system works. If you think it is the politicians that are keeping an eye on intelligence and defence and security, it's not. It's the Cabinet Office, and even politicians themselves don't know who in the Cabinet Office are really the powerful people pulling the strings. But this is how it works. We've got the COBRA system, we've got the Joint Intelligence Committee, we've got the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and the Ministry of Defence. You'll notice there that the Ministry of Defence is placed a little bit lower than the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and that's because we now know that, of course, the Ministry of Defence is subservient to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office as Britain's armed forces are further integrated into European Defence Union, and that is all controlled through the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, not the Ministry of Defence. So that's why MOD is at a slightly lower level. But let's have a look. COBRA is responsible for Homeland Security. That's the phrase that's being used. And of course, that leads into Gold Command, which would usually bring together the Special Intelligence Services, the police, military experts, and they'd be responsible for the overall strategic command of serious operations or threats perceived likely within UK. And note that the European Union is also listed there because, of course, all of this is now integrated with the European Union thanks to Theresa May's work on Brexit. Now, there's another strand to this, which is labelled overseas disruption. And this gets particularly interesting because we've got the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. I'll come back on that one in just a second. We've also got the Joint Intelligence Committee looking at broad spectrum intelligence. They're sucking in information from any and every source, whether it's spies or signals intelligence or reading overseas newspapers. That's all there. We've also got the Foreign and Commonwealth Office using its people overseas, human intelligence, to bring in information. But they've also, of course, historically used the BBC monitoring, and highly likely that BBC Media Action, being used in Eastern Europe, for example, will be collecting information and passing it back to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. That is my assessment. We don't have precise evidence on that at the moment. EU also involved because, of course, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office is now highly integrated with the European Union for this type of activity. The Ministry of Defence, military intelligence, and the prime partnership is, of course, with the US, but other NATO countries are part of that system. And again, we see the European Union because as a result of Brexit, without the exit, Britain's armed forces are now integrated with the European Union system. Now let's bring in GCHQ, because GCHQ has an input right the way across all of these sectors, and we'll also add UK Special Forces there. Now note they come under overseas disruption, but they form really private army for the Cabinet Office, because Westminster is certainly not debating the use of these troops. So we have an unknown group of people within the Cabinet Office, the government of occupation, with its private army and this massive spying system. And let's remember, of course, that the dodgy dossier, the Iraq dossier, which was really full of lies, was used to start the Iraq war. That came out of the Joint Intelligence Committee. So who is running this show within the Cabinet Office? We don't know. We do now know that GCHQ is getting into bed with the banks, but we also know the banks are certainly supporting and sponsoring key politicians within the Cabinet Office. So I wonder whether basically this intelligence system is being run by the banks themselves. And we'll just remind people that it was a few years ago that we had Francis Maude, who casually announced that everything to do with UK's intelligence system was going to be fully linked with Israel. And this was via the Israeli Defence Force Unit 8200, but also through linkages between Israeli and UK universities. And we were interested to see it also included liaison and partnerships and collaboration between Britain's police and the Israelis. So this is a very interesting situation, and your point's always been, Mike, that when the government talks about defence, or when the European Union talks about defence, that includes policing and internal security. So we'll just give an example about how good the Cabinet Office intelligence system is. This is going back to 2015, where a lady who was alleged, charges were brought that she'd been involved in the abuse of very small children, was selected for an award. And what the Cabinet said was that it could not comment on individual cases, but as part of the award nomination process, we try to minimise the risk that prospective candidates have behaved in ways likely to bring the system into disrepute. We protect the integrity of the honours system by carrying out probity checks with a number of government departments before names are submitted. I've added Jimmy Savile ? It's not credible that this vast intelligence network is doing its job because it can't weed out these sorts of people. So what is this intelligence system doing?
Good question.
Good question. We'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us. If you're interested in attending Robert Greene's funeral, I will put out some more information via Twitter, and you can pick that up there. That's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be back at the same time on Friday. Bye-bye.